Deep beneath the surface of Earth in a secret military base that did not appear on any public maps, General Nathan Cross studied dozens of screens showing alien ship movements. Nathan was a thin man with sharp eyes and silver hair. He had spent 30 years preparing for this exact moment, even though most people thought he was being paranoid. "Sir, the Zelkari have taken 3 more colonies," reported Dr. Sandra Lee, walking into the command center with a thick folder of papers. Sandra was a brilliant woman who studied how different species thought and fought. She had been watching the aliens carefully since the first contact 6 months ago. Nathan nodded without looking away from the screens. "Everything is going according to plan, Doctor. The Zelkari are doing exactly what we hoped they would do." Sandra sat down at her desk and opened her folder. Inside were detailed reports about every Zelkari battle, every message they had sent, and every decision their commanders had made. "Their psychology is remarkably predictable, General. They value direct confrontation above all else. They cannot imagine that an enemy might retreat for strategic reasons rather than fear." In another part of the base, Captain Jake Morrison was back on Earth, but he was not resting after his long space mission. Jake was working with a team of engineers to modify his ship, the New Horizon. The ship looked the same from the outside, but inside it was being fitted with new weapons and armor that the Zelkari had never seen. "Captain, the new stealth systems are ready for testing," said Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks. Ryan was a young officer who specialized in electronic warfare. "The aliens will not be able to detect us until we want them to." Jake walked around, his ship examining the new equipment. Hidden weapon ports had been built into the hull. Advanced sensors that could track enemy ships from enormous distances were installed behind fake cargo panels. "How many other ships are getting these upgrades, Ryan?" "All of them, sir," Ryan replied with a slight smile. "Every exploration vessel, every cargo ship, every transport that the Zelkari think are harmless civilian craft. Admiral Carter has been working on this project for 5 years. Meanwhile, on the planet Haven's Rest, that the Zelkari had recently captured, something strange was happening underground. Major Chris Thompson crawled through a narrow tunnel beneath what used to be Mary Johnson's farm. Chris was a Special Forces soldier who had been secretly stationed on the planet long before the invasion. The tunnel led to a hidden bunker that the Zelkari had never found. Inside the bunker were weapons, supplies, and communication equipment. Chris was not alone. 20 other soldiers had been hiding on Haven's Rest, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. "Command, this is Shadow Base 1, Chris whispered into his radio. "The aliens have established a garrison in the main town. They have approximately 200 soldiers and 3 patrol ships. They believe the planet is secure." The voice that answered came from Earth, from General Cross himself. "Understood, Shadow Base 1. Continue monitoring. Do not engage until Phase 3 begins." The same scene was happening on every human colony the Zelkari had captured. Hidden bases that had been built years ago were now active. Soldiers who had posed as farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers were revealing their true identities. The Zelkari thought they controlled these worlds, but they had no idea they were being watched every moment. Back on Earth, in the public halls of the government, a very different kind of performance was taking place. Senator Bill Harrison stood before the news cameras, looking worried and upset. "The alien invasion is a disaster," Senator Harrison said to the reporters. "Our colonies are falling one by one, and our military seems powerless to stop them. We must negotiate with these Zelkari before they reach Earth itself." The reporters asked many questions about Earth's defenses and military plans. Senator Harrison gave answers that made humanity sound weak and desperate. Every word was carefully chosen to make the Zelkari believe that Earth was not prepared for war. What the public did not know was that Senator Harrison was part of the deception. His worried speeches were being intercepted by Zelkari communications, exactly as planned. The aliens were supposed to think that Earth's government was full of fear and confusion. Admiral Helen Carter stood in the real command center, watching Senator Harrison's performance on one of her screens. Helen was the commander of Earth's entire military, though most of the galaxy thought she was just an administrator. She turned to her staff officers with satisfaction. "The Zelkari intelligence services are analyzing every word of that speech," Helen said. "They will report to their high command that Earth is in panic and has no coordinated defense strategy." Intelligence Officer Michelle Davis looked up from her computer. "Admiral, our deep space monitoring stations have detected the main Zelkari fleet. They are heading toward the New Geneva system just as Dr. Lee predicted they would." New Geneva was one of humanity's most important colonies, with over 2 million people and major industrial facilities. To the Zelkari, it would look like a valuable prize that was too important for humans to abandon. They would expect a major battle there. They were right about the battle, but wrong about everything else. On New Geneva, Director Paul Anderson was overseeing what appeared to be a massive evacuation. Thousands of civilian ships were leaving the planet, carrying families and their belongings to safety. The news broadcasts showed long lines of scared people waiting to board transport vessels. But Paul knew that half of those civilian ships were actually military vessels in disguise. The scared families included hundreds of Special Forces soldiers dressed as ordinary citizens. And the evacuation was actually the largest military deployment in human history, disguised to look like a retreat. Captain Angela White was one of the soldiers pretending to be a refugee. She sat on a transport ship with a fake family carrying luggage that contained advanced weapons instead of clothes. Around her, other passengers were also secret military personnel, all playing their roles perfectly. "Mommy, are the bad aliens going to hurt us?" asked a little girl sitting near Angela. The child was a real civilian, and her fear was genuine. Angela smiled gently at the girl. "Do not worry, sweetheart. The grown-ups have a plan to keep everyone safe." It was not a lie. The grown-ups did have a plan, and it was far more complex and dangerous than any Zelkari commander could imagine. As the Zelkari fleet approached New Geneva, Admiral Vextar felt confident about his upcoming victory. His intelligence reports said that Earth's military was in chaos, their colonies were defenseless, and their people were too frightened to fight effectively. "General Tissakor," Vextar said to his ground commander, "prepare your troops for the assault on New Geneva. This will be our greatest conquest yet. Once we control this world, the path to Earth itself will be open." Tessakor bowed his scaly head. "Yes, Admiral. My warriors are eager to claim this prize. The humans will surrender quickly when they see our full strength." Neither of them realized that every move they made was being watched, recorded, and analyzed by human intelligence services. Neither of them suspected that the cowardly humans had been preparing for this moment for decades. The trap was set, and the Zelkari were walking directly into it. 6 months after the first meeting with humans, Admiral Vextar stood in the command center of his massive warship. The Zelkari commander was tall and covered in dark green scales that gleamed under the ship's lights. His yellow eyes stared at the star map showing human space. Dozens of red dots marked human colonies, all looking like easy targets. "The High Command has given us permission to begin the expansion," Vextar said to his officers. His voice was deep and commanding. "We will start with their farming worlds. These humans grow food on planets far from their home world. They will be helpless when we arrive." General Tissakor, the ground forces commander, clicked his claws, together with excitement. "My warriors are ready, Admiral. We have studied the recordings from War Chief Kethrak's meeting with the human ship. They run away instead of fighting. This will be easier than conquering the Mathani colonies." The first target was a world called Haven's Rest. It was a quiet farming planet where humans grew crops to feed other colonies. The planet had only 50,000 people, mostly families who worked the land. There were no big cities, no factories, making weapons, and no strong military bases. On Haven's Rest, Governor Peter Collins was working in his office when the emergency communication came from Earth. Peter was a kind man who had been a teacher before becoming governor. He had never expected to face an alien invasion. "Governor Collins," the voice from Earth Command said, "we have detected a large alien fleet moving toward your planet. You need to begin evacuation procedures immediately." Peter felt his hands shake as he pressed the emergency button on his desk. Loud sirens began to sound across all the towns and farms on Haven's Rest. The evacuation plan had been practiced many times, but nobody thought it would ever be real. Mary Johnson was picking vegetables in her garden when she heard the sirens. Mary had lived on Haven's Rest for 20 years with her husband Bill and their 2 children. She dropped her basket and ran toward the house, calling for her family. "Bill, kids, we need to get to the transport station now," she shouted. Bill came running from the barn where he had been feeding their animals. "Is this real, Mary? Are the aliens really coming?" Their children, 10-year-old Kate and 8-year-old Tim, came out of the house looking scared. Tim was crying and Kate held his hand tightly. "We practiced this, remember?" Mary said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We take our emergency bags and go to the transport ships. Everything will be okay." All across Haven's Rest, families were doing the same thing. People packed their most important belongings and drove or walked to the transport stations. The ships that usually carried crops to other worlds now carried people instead. Colonel Steve Martinez was in charge of the planet's small defense force. Steve was a former Earth military officer who had come to Haven's Rest for a quiet retirement. Now he had to organize the evacuation while keeping the alien fleet from landing too soon. "How long do we have?" Steve asked his communications officer. "The alien ships will arrive in 8 hours, sir," came the reply. "The evacuation transports need at least 6 hours to get everyone off the planet." Steve looked at his 20 soldiers. They had rifles and a few vehicles, but nothing that could stop alien warships. Their job was not to win a battle. Their job was to buy time for the civilians to escape. As the huge Zelkari fleet appeared in the sky above Haven's Rest, General Thesacor looked down at the planet with satisfaction. His scouts had reported humans running to ships and leaving the planet. It was exactly what War Chief Kethrak had said would happen. "They run like scared animals," Thesacor said to his officers. "Send down the first landing force, take the main town, and secure the food storage areas." The Zelkari landing ships descended through the atmosphere like metal meteors. Each ship carried 50 warrior soldiers armed with energy weapons and personal armor. They expected to find empty buildings and maybe a few humans hiding in fear. Instead, they found Colonel Martinez and his soldiers waiting for them. The first Zelkari ship landed in the town square of Haven's Rest. The alien warriors came out ready to claim their prize, but gunfire immediately erupted from windows and rooftops. Steve's soldiers had hidden throughout the town, turning every building into a small fortress. The Zelkari warriors were confused. Their intelligence had said humans were cowards who would not fight. But these humans were shooting at them with surprising skill and determination. "Sir, we are taking casualties," one Zelkari officer reported to General Thesacor. "The humans are fighting back harder than expected." Thesacor was annoyed but not worried. "Send more troops. These are just a few desperate soldiers. Once we show them our full strength, they will surrender or die." For 3 hours, the battle continued. Steve's soldiers used every trick they knew to slow down the Zelkari advance. They blocked roads, set traps, and moved from building to building to avoid being surrounded. Several human soldiers were killed, but they took many more Zelkari warriors with them. Meanwhile, the last evacuation ships were leaving Haven's Rest. Mary Johnson and her family were on one of the final transports, looking down at their burning home as the ship carried them to safety. "Will we ever come back?" little Tim asked his mother. Mary did not know what to say. She could see explosions and fires where their town used to be. "I hope so, honey," she said finally. "I really hope so." When the evacuation was complete, Colonel Martinez gave the order to retreat. His remaining soldiers used their last transport to escape the planet. They had lost half their number, but they had saved every civilian on Haven's Rest. General Thyssacor finally took control of the planet, but he was not happy. "They fought much harder than expected," he reported to Admiral Vextar. "Perhaps some. Humans are not as cowardly as we thought." Admiral Vextar dismissed the concern. "Desperate creatures will always fight when cornered. It means nothing. Continue with the next target." But something bothered Thyssacor about the battle. The human soldiers had fought too well for scared cowards. They moved like they had a plan, like they were buying time for something, and they had succeeded in saving everyone on the planet. Still, the Zelkari fleet moved on to the next human world. They had won an easy victory and captured valuable farmland. The few human soldiers who had resisted were obviously just the exception, not the rule. The Zelkari had no idea that every detail of the battle was being recorded and sent back to Earth Command. They did not know that human strategists were studying their tactics, their weapons, and their weaknesses. Most importantly, they did not understand that the evacuation of Haven's Rest had gone exactly according to plan. The humans were learning, and they were preparing. But the Zelkari still thought. They were fighting cowards. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the stars through the large front window. His ship had been traveling through space for 3 months, looking for new worlds and maybe new friends among the stars. Jake was a calm man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been a space captain for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like what was coming toward his ship. "Captain, we have something big on our screens," said Lieutenant Danny Park from his chair at the control panel. Danny was young and smart, with quick fingers that danced across the buttons and lights. "It looks like 5 ships, sir. They are much bigger than ours." Jake walked over to Danny's station and looked at the green glowing screen. The shapes moving toward them were huge, at least 10 times bigger than the New Horizon. The ships looked like they were made for fighting, with long, sharp points and what looked like weapon ports along their sides. "Lisa, come to the bridge, please," Jake said into his communication device. Commander Lisa Barnes was his best officer for talking to new people. She was smart and calm, and she could speak several Earth languages perfectly. If they were about to meet aliens for the first time, Jake wanted Lisa there. Lisa arrived quickly, her brown hair pulled back and her uniform neat and clean. She looked at the screen and raised her eyebrows. "Those are definitely not human ships, Captain," she said. "The design is completely different from anything we have ever built." Tony Rodriguez, the ship's engineer, came running onto the bridge. Tony was a big man with strong hands that could fix anything on the ship. "Captain, those ships are sending out some kind of signal," he said, breathing hard. "It is not like any radio wave we know. Dr. Walsh is trying to figure out what it means. Dr. Bay." Amy Walsh was the ship's doctor, but she was also very good with computers and languages. She had studied alien communication theories at the Space Academy. If anyone could understand an alien message, it would be Amy. Minutes later, Amy's voice came through the ship's speakers. "Captain, I think I have translated part of their message. They are telling us to stop our ship and prepare to be examined. The tone seems very demanding." Jake felt his heart beat faster. This was the moment humans had been waiting for since they first reached the stars. Contact with another intelligent species, but these aliens did not sound friendly. "Open a channel, Danny," Jake ordered. "Let me talk to them." Danny pressed several buttons, and a crackling sound filled the bridge. Then Jake heard a voice that was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. The words were in English, but the accent was strange and harsh. "Small ship of unknown species," the voice said. "You will identify yourselves immediately. This space belongs to the Zelkari Empire. All vessels must submit to inspection." Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded and stepped forward. "This is Commander, Lisa Barnes of the human vessel New Horizon," she said in her most polite voice. "We come in peace from the planet Earth. We are explorers, not warriors. We would like to establish friendly contact with your people." There was a long silence. Then the alien voice laughed, but it was not a happy sound. It was cold and mean. "Humans," the voice said, "we have not heard of your species. You speak of peace like weak creatures. In the Zelkari Empire, only the strong survive." On the main screen, one of the huge alien ships moved closer. Jake could see its dark metal surface covered with spikes and weapon barrels. It was clearly built for war, not exploration like the New Horizon. "I am War Chief Kethrak of the ship Dominion Spear," the voice continued. "You will allow us to board your vessel and examine your technology. If you refuse, we will take it by force." Lisa stepped closer to the communication panel. "War Chief Kethrak, we would be happy to share information about our culture and science. We believe all intelligent species can benefit from working together. Perhaps we could meet somewhere neutral to discuss an agreement." The alien laughed again, louder this time. Other voices could be heard in the background, also laughing. "You speak like children afraid of the dark," Kethrak said. "The Zelkari do not make agreements with weak species. We take what we want from those too scared to fight." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "We are not afraid," he said. "We simply prefer to solve problems with words instead of weapons. Surely intelligent beings can find better ways than violence." "Intelligent?" Kethrak's voice was full of scorn. "Intelligence without strength is worthless. Your soft words prove you are cowards. The galaxy belongs to warriors, not to creatures who hide behind pretty speeches." Tony stepped up to Jake's side. "Captain," he whispered, "their weapons are charging. I can see energy building up in those gun ports." Jake made a quick decision. The New Horizon was fast and could probably escape, but it could not fight 5 huge warships. Starting a battle would only prove the aliens right about humans being weak, and it would probably get his crew killed. "Danny, prepare to leave this area," Jake ordered quietly. "Plot a course back toward Earth space." "Running away already?" Kethrak's voice came through the speakers. The alien had somehow heard Jake's order. "This proves what I suspected. Humans are nothing but cowards who flee at the first sign of danger." Lisa tried one more time. "War Chief, we are leaving to avoid unnecessary conflict. This does not make us cowards. It makes us wise. Violence should always be the last choice, not the first. Wisdom is what the weak call their fear." Kethrak replied, "Go then, soft shells. Run back to your safe little world. But know this, the Zelkari Empire will remember that humans are creatures of no honor. When we expand into your space, we will not expect much resistance from such frightened beings." The New Horizon began to move away from the alien fleet. Jake watched the huge ships on his screen, knowing that this first meeting had gone very badly. The aliens thought humans were cowards, and Jake had given them good reason to believe it. "Captain," Lisa said quietly, "did we do the right thing?" Jake looked at his crew. Danny was still working at his controls, getting them safely away. Tony was checking the ship's systems to make sure they could escape quickly. Amy was recording everything for the report they would have to make when they got home. "We saved our ship and our crew," Jake said finally. "But I am afraid we may have started something much bigger than a simple misunderstanding." As the New Horizon jumped into faster-than-light travel, heading home to Earth, Jake could not know that War Chief Kethrak was already sending messages to the Zelkari High Command. The message was simple. Humans were weak, cowardly creatures who would be easy to conquer. The Zelkari had no idea how wrong they were. The thing that came from dark space was beyond description. Captain Beth Stone stood on the bridge of the Earthship Defiance, staring at the view screen in stunned silence. The entity called the silence filled half the sky like a living moon, made of nightmares. It was not built by any machine. It had grown over millions of years, feeding on the minds it captured. Black organic walls pulsed like a heartbeat. Strange lights flickered across its surface like synapses firing in a giant brain. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. "All ships, this is Admiral Morgan," came the voice over the radio from the battle station Prometheus. "Remember, we get one chance at this. 17 targets, 17 ships. Hit them all at exactly the same moment, or we fail." Beth checked her instruments one more time. Her ship was armed with a quantum disruption weapon built from Dragon technology. The weapon had never been tested in real combat. She hoped it would work when the time came. The first communication from the silence did not come through radio waves. It came directly into the minds of every human in the fleet. Not words, but pure thought pressed into their brains like ice. "Water. Deaf ones," the voice said inside their heads. "You interest us. We have never encountered minds so empty. Join us willingly, and your uniqueness will be preserved in our collection. Resist, and become nothing at all." Admiral Lisa Morgan felt the alien thoughts trying to take root in her mind. But the thoughts found nothing to grab onto. Human minds were too simple, too basic for the silence to control directly. "This is Admiral Morgan of the Earth Defense Force," she broadcast on all frequencies. "We've been nothing before. We got pretty good at it." The silence's response was immediate and terrible. Waves of psychic energy rolled out from the massive entity, designed to shut down neural activity in any thinking creature. The waves washed over the human fleet like invisible tsunamis. But nothing happened. Human brains, evolved without any psychic sensitivity, were completely immune to the attack. "All ships, attack formation now," Morgan ordered. "Show this thing what the deaf kids can do." The battle began with Earth's fighters swarming around the silence like angry insects. Captain Pete Collins led the squadron called Death's Head, weaving between the entity's defensive weapons. The silence fired beams of pure mental energy that could drive a psychic being insane instantly. But the beams passed through human minds without effect. "This is Death Leader," Pete reported over the radio. "Their mental weapons aren't working on us. Repeat, we are immune to their primary defenses." Dr. Ryan Carter, now serving aboard the science vessel Newton, monitored the battle from a safe distance. His job was to study the silence's structure and find the 17 quantum resonance points that Vexithar had described. "Target points identified," Ryan announced, "sending coordinates to all attack ships now." The quantum disruption points were scattered across the silence's massive body. Some were hidden deep in crater-like depressions. Others pulsed with energy on high ridges. All 17 had to be hit simultaneously to break the dimensional prison holding billions of trapped minds. As the human fleet closed in on their targets, the silence began to adapt. Physical weapons emerged from its organic surface. Beam cannons that could vaporize metal, gravity weapons that could crush ships like empty cans, missile launchers that fired projectiles the size of buildings. The battle became a desperate race against time. Human ships dodged and weaved through the alien weapons, trying to reach their assigned targets. Several ships were destroyed, their crews dying in flashes of superheated plasma. Captain Tony Rodriguez, now commanding the cruiser Liberty, pushed his ship through a barrage of enemy fire. His target was a quantum point located in what looked like a massive organic valve on the silence's underside. "Almost there," Tony reported, his ship shaking from near misses. 30 seconds to target." But the most shocking discovery came when Pete Collins managed to penetrate deeper into the entity's defenses. Flying his small fighter through a gap in the silence's armor, he found himself inside the creature's body. What he saw there would haunt him forever. The interior was a vast cathedral of living tissue filled with countless transparent chambers. In each chamber floated a being from somewhere in the galaxy. Dragons, crystal creatures, whale-like entities, machine intelligences, and 1,000 other species Pete had never imagined. They were all perfectly preserved, their bodies suspended, in some kind of energy field. But their eyes were open and aware. They were conscious prisoners in their own bodies, their minds connected to the silence's vast neural network. "My God," Pete whispered into his radio. "They're all still alive in here." In one of the chambers, Pete saw War Prince Vexithar himself. The dragon leader's golden eyes met Pete's through the transparent wall. Vexthar's mouth moved, forming words Pete could not hear but understood perfectly. "Do it now." Admiral Morgan received Pete's report just as all 17 attack ships reached their targets. The quantum disruption weapons were armed and ready. The fate of billions of minds depended on perfect timing. "All ships, prepare to fire on my mark," Morgan announced. "Remember, this is for every voice that has been silenced, every dream that has been stolen, every species that has been lost to this cosmic horror." The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, mark. 17 quantum disruption beams, fired simultaneously, striking the resonance points scattered across the silence's body. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then reality itself began to crack around the impact points. The silence's psychic scream tore through space, a sound of rage and pain that would have driven any telepathic being mad with terror. But human ears heard only silence, and human minds felt only satisfaction. Cracks of brilliant light spread across the entity's surface as its dimensional prison began to collapse. The trapped consciousness of billions of beings suddenly found themselves free to return to their bodies across the galaxy. Streams of pure thought raced away from the dying construct like shooting stars, each one carrying a mind back to its home world. War Prince Vexthar materialized on the bridge of the Defiance, his golden eyes bright with something that looked like gratitude. "Impossible," he rumbled in his thunder voice. "The Deaf Ones have done what no psychic civilization could accomplish. You have defeated the silence itself." As the massive entity broke apart and dissolved into quantum foam, something amazing began to happen across the galaxy. Radio signals started returning from alien worlds. The great civilizations were awakening from their enforced sleep. The crystal beings of Centauri began flashing their light patterns again. The whale mines near Betelgeuse resumed their ancient songs. The machine races of Vega started broadcasting their mathematical heartbeats. President Wells addressed the awakening galaxy from Earth. "To all civilizations who can hear this message, this is Catherine Wells, President of Earth. The silence has been defeated. You are free." As responses began flooding in from grateful worlds across the galaxy, humanity found itself in a position no one had ever expected. They were no longer the primitive species hiding in the corner of space. They were the species that had stood against extinction itself and won. The deaf had become the guardians of the Symphony of Worlds. And for the first time in galactic history, the stars sang humanity's name with reverence and wonder. 6 months after the Great Vanishing, Dr. Nathan Cross made the discovery that changed everything. He was working alone in the abandoned dragon camp in Central Park, surrounded by equipment that beeped and hummed in the cold morning air. Nathan had been studying the quantum traces left behind when War Prince Vexithar disappeared. For weeks, he had found nothing but empty energy patterns. Then, at exactly 3 in the morning, his instruments detected something impossible. "That can't be right," Nathan whispered, checking his readings 3 times. The quantum field where the dragon leader had vanished was broadcasting a message. Not just any message, but a live transmission from Vexithar himself. Nathan's hands shook as he worked to decode the signal. The message was weak and filled with static, like a radio transmission from very far away. But the voice was unmistakably the thunder-like speech of the Dragon War Prince. "This is War Prince Vexthar of the Draconian Empire," the message began. "If you receive this transmission, know that we are not dead. We are trapped between dimensions, held prisoner by the entity you must call the Silence." Nathan grabbed his radio and called Dr. Susan Davis. "Susan, get down here right now. You need to hear this." Within an hour, a team of scientists had gathered around Nathan's equipment. The message from Vexthar continued to repeat every 20 minutes, growing weaker each time. "The Silence has been hunting psychic species for millions of years," Vexthar's voice crackled through the speakers. "It does not kill us. It collects us. Our minds are stored in a vast network that spans the dark space between galaxies. We are conscious, but powerless." Dr. Amy Wilson, who led the quantum archaeology team, connected additional equipment to boost the signal. As the transmission became clearer, more terrifying details emerged. Every psychic civilization that has ever existed is trapped in the Silence's collection, Vexthar explained. Billions of minds from thousands of worlds, all connected in an endless prison of thought. The Silence feeds on our mental energy to grow stronger. The message paused, filled with sounds that might have been dragon tears if dragons could cry. Then Vexthar's voice returned, urgent and desperate. "But there is hope. The Silence has one weakness. It cannot directly affect minds that lack psychic ability. You humans are invisible to its mental attacks. You are the first species in galactic history that might be able to fight back." President Wells was awakened at 4 in the morning to hear the complete message. She sat in her pajamas in the White House Situation Room, listening to the voice of humanity's former enemy pleading for help. "The Silence will come to Earth soon," Vexthar warned. "It has noticed that the galactic psychic network has gone quiet. It will investigate. When it arrives, it will try to determine what happened to us. That is when you must strike." The final part of the message contained technical information that took the scientists days to understand. Vexthar described the Silence as a living construct the size of a small moon. It was part machine, part organic entity, and part pure mental energy. Inside its vast body were stored the consciousness of every psychic species it had ever encountered. "The construct has 17 quantum resonance points," Vexthar explained. "If these points are disrupted simultaneously, the dimensional prison will collapse. All the trapped minds will be freed to return to their bodies across the galaxy." But there was a catch. The 17 points had to be hit at exactly the same moment. Even a few seconds of delay would allow the Silence to repair the damage and strengthen its defenses. Commander Brad Lewis, now leading Earth's rapidly expanding space fleet, studied the technical data with his engineers. Building weapons capable of damaging quantum resonance points would require technology that was decades beyond human capability. "We'll need to reverse engineer Dragon technology," Brad told Admiral Morgan during a secure video conference. "The Dragons left behind some equipment when they vanished. Maybe we can figure out how their weapons work." Dr. Ryan Carter, the xenobiologist who had first observed the Dragon landing, led the effort to understand alien technology. The Dragons had left behind several small devices in their abandoned camps. Most were too damaged to study, but a few were still functional. "Their weapons don't use bullets or energy beams," Ryan explained to the research team. "They manipulate quantum fields directly. They can make matter unstable at the atomic level." The breakthrough came when Dr. Susan Davis discovered that Dragon technology responded to human brain waves. Not because humans were psychic, but because they were not psychic. The technology was designed to work with non-telepathic minds as a safety feature. "It makes sense," Susan told the research team. "If you build weapons that respond to telepathic commands, and then the Silence takes over your mind, you lose control of your own weapons. But if the weapons only respond to non-psychic brains, they're safe from mental takeover." Within 3 months, human engineers had built the first quantum disruption weapons based on Dragon technology. The weapons were crude compared to Dragon originals, but they would work. The problem was getting close enough to the Silence to use them. Captain Roy Barnes, now commanding a squadron of modified human ships, ran practice missions in the asteroid belt. His pilots had to learn to hit 17 different targets simultaneously while under enemy fire. The margin for error was 0. "Remember," Roy told his pilots during their final briefing, "this thing has destroyed civilizations that were thousands of years more advanced than us. Our only advantage is that it doesn't know we're coming." Long-range sensors detected the first signs of the Silence's approach in early autumn. Something vast was moving through the dark space beyond Pluto, heading toward the inner solar system. The entity was still too far away to see clearly, but its gravitational effects were bending light from distant stars. Dr. Helen Brooks tracked the entity's approach from her monitoring station in Colorado. "It's huge," she reported to President Wells. "Whatever this thing is, it's roughly the size of Earth's moon, and it's accelerating." As the Silence drew closer, strange effects began appearing throughout the solar system. The aurora borealis appeared over tropical cities. Compasses pointed in random directions. Electronics failed and restarted for no reason. But the strangest effect was what happened to Earth's small population of telepathic individuals. People who claimed to have psychic abilities began reporting the same dream. They saw a vast, dark space filled with billions of floating minds. The minds were trying to warn Earth about something terrible that was coming. President Wells addressed the world one final time before the battle. "6 months ago, we thought we were facing invasion by a superior alien force. We were wrong. We were witnessing the arrival of refugees fleeing from something far worse. Today we face that something, an entity that has silenced every advanced civilization in our galaxy, an entity that has turned billions of minds into prisoners, an entity that believes humanity is too primitive to fight back." Wells paused, looking directly into the camera. "It's about to learn that being primitive has its advantages." The Silence emerged from the darkness between worlds like a nightmare made real, and humanity prepared for the most important battle in the history of the universe.